afternoon, everyone, and happy Monday. Welcome to Stock Market Today. Alyssa Corman, Justin Nielsen here to break down the market action in today's session up across the board and underneath the surface. Justin, clue us in. What is interesting that we need to be analyzing?
Well, we're going to talk a little bit about financials just to start off, but in terms of individual stocks, we'll talk about Entegris in the semiconductors, Albemarle in the chemicals, and we'll wrap it up with what was the third one? Inmode. A revisit to Inmode. Yes, let's revisit Inmode that you and Ken talked about on Thursday.
With an explosive move today. We'll get to that. But first, a look at the major indexes. So here is the NASDAQ. We saw a gain of 0.2% today. The S&P 500 up 0.4%. Same for the Dow, and the Russell up a little bit as well. So we're still continuing to see gains after a bit of a test for investors last week, Justin.
Yeah, and we were talking about this on IBD Live this morning, and I guess my biggest concern was that it wasn't much of a test, right? And so now for the NASDAQ and the S&P 500, we're right back there at new highs, potentially getting extended. So that's the concern is, was it enough of a break? There are some setups out there. We saw a lot of reversals on Thursday, and you can see why. Just look at the action in the NASDAQ on that day. It was down considerably, didn't even come to the 21-day line, and closed well off of its lows. And that put a lot of reversals that we were seeing on that day. And then they followed up on Friday. And now today, some of them were showing even stronger action. So that's the kind of thing that you want to look for in terms of opportunities. But I will say that one of the things I didn't like was I was hoping for a little bit more of a pullback, maybe even below the 21-day moving average line or even to the 50-day, so that it didn't feel quite as extended as we are right now.
Yeah, there were a couple of pretty good opportunities on that day, reversal wise, but other stocks, I think about software. A lot of those stocks that were extended maybe didn't see quite enough of a shakeout. Maybe we needed a little bit more to set up those new proper buying opportunities. But let's take a look at the S&P 500. Here's the SPY ETF. Continuing higher as well. And so the NASDAQ is about 5.6% or so above its 50-day line. And we'll just pull up the S&P 500 here as well. Even though this chart is a little bit delayed, you roughly get the picture here. It's about 3.8% above the 50-day line. So the NASDAQ seems like it's the area that we're concerned about with it getting extended. 6 or 7% is kind of the magic number there.
Right. That's and again, it doesn't mean that you see that and then you say, okay, well, forget it, I'm out. That just is a warning sign. So a lot of times you can see it go even further above that. So it's just one of those things where you're going to watch your stocks, you're going to watch the indexes, and if you start feeling like, hey, I'm gonna sell some into strength, that's always a good idea. You can always buy some of that back if there is a pullback. But then as it's going up further, and you're selling into some of that strength, you naturally get a little bit less exposed. So when the pullback does happen, you're not hit as hard, but it doesn't mean that you have to sell everything. And that's why we always say, look, it's not selling is not an all or nothing proposition. If you're selling a little bit into the strength, then if stocks come down, you can sell a little bit into the weakness and possibly pick some more shares up on some of these reversals or future setups.
Yes, definitely. And you mentioned the strength in financials today. So here's a look at XLF, up 1% for the day, getting right back to that 50-day line. So we're seeing a lot of bank stocks in bases right here, maybe right around their 50-day lines. But it's earnings season. So that's the big catalyst potentially, or the big risk.
Right, exactly.
Buying at this time.
Yeah, exactly. With this week having so many big banks coming out, you got Goldman Sachs, you got JP Morgan, you've got Wells Fargo, Bank of America. I mean, the list goes on and on. And if they're not reporting this week, next week, it pretty much wraps up a bunch more. So there is that risk. But I also wanted to just point out, look, the financials have been struggling a little bit. And while I like to see it get back to its 50-day moving average line, I'm not convinced yet. I want to see it get through that line. A lot of the stocks look very similar to this XLF ETF, which is a spider sector fund. So this is an area where it could potentially, if let's say earnings don't go the way that you expect, or is not as positive, you could potentially get resistance at this 50-day line. That often acts as support, an area where you bounce off of, but once you get below it, it can act as a ceiling and you can bounce your head off of it and then get knocked back down. So I think there is a risk there. There's been a lot of money flowing out of financials lately. And while today was strong, just be careful.
Well, we'll have to see how the action shakes out throughout this week and next with all those earnings reports coming in. But elsewhere, checking in on Albemarle, ticker ALB, a big move for the stock out of a cup with handle base, up 7% on the day, and some heavy volume, Justin, behind this move.
Yeah, and I will say that, if you look at the pattern recognition, it's one where it identified a 177.68 cup with handle buy point. Now, we put this on Swing Trader on Friday. So why did we do that? Well, look at the action. It had actually kind of cleared that earlier area around 172.25, roughly. Yeah, you can put a downtrend there. You could draw a line straight across. There was some pretty strong action on that day with some pretty good volume. And so that was a signal for us on Swing Trader to maybe potentially get an early entry. Now, today there was a lot of strength in lithium stocks, and that's why this chemicals play was working. We didn't know that was coming, but again, sometimes if you get these early entries, when you get a day like today, now you've got some cushion. Now you can handle this a lot differently. You could even potentially change this into a position trade. Or if you didn't get in on that early entry, if you were really on it this morning, you could have gotten in right in that buy zone fairly easily, because again, you had some time. It wasn't a gap up that just got way out of there. This was something that you had some time in those early minutes of the trading session. Even the first 30 minutes, no problem.
Yeah, and this is a stock that has been on our radar. It's been making our screen, so fitting the criteria. We're looking at different fundamental and technical metrics. So great job to the Swing Trader team. And again, we covered it on IBD Live this morning.
And whenever we start practicing on how to pronounce a name, then that's something that we're watching closely.
Yes.
So in a lot of our individual sessions,
ALB.
We're all just Albemarle. Yeah.
Yes. It's a fun one to say.
Yeah.
All right. And well, what about Entegris, ENTG, seeing a handle form here? The stock up a little bit today, right around that 120 area. Would that make it actionable if it were to get over 120? Or what about at these levels?
Well, and here, I wanted to bring this up because I like the look of the setup. I think it looks great, but I am a little concerned that semiconductors have not performed like I thought they would. If you pull up SMH, you look at it and it's been basing fairly nice, and Entegris has been doing a very similar thing. But when you look at the NASDAQ, SMH really seemed like this was going to be leading the NASDAQ, leading technology, because this seemed like it was the first group to really start moving. And, it just hasn't really performed as much as I'd like, and that's not to say that I don't think that there's still potential here. Aparna wrote a great story on, the shortages in chips, what that means for autos and everything. But when you compare what happened with the NASDAQ composite and how much further the NASDAQ got into that new high territory versus SMH, I think there is a concern. There are definitely those strong ones that have been acting very differently. And NVDA, of course, is one that we've been talking a lot about. I actually own shares in this one myself. So that's been acting very differently than the SMH Van Eck Vectors Semiconductor Fund. So it's just be aware of, do you truly have the leader? I like the look of Entegris. If it breaks out here, I think that looks interesting. This is one of the good setups that I think is out there. But I would say, again, just like with the financials, I am being a little cautious just because they haven't shown as much strength as I would have liked lately.
Okay, well, this is a setup to keep on the watch list, and if it can have a strong move, maybe we'll pay more attention to it.
And I want to say I can change my mind just with a day's action of strength and volume coming in.
As you should.
Right, exactly. You always have to be flexible.
That's what we're taught to do. Okay, so Inmode, INMD. Wow, what a move to kick off the week for this stock, up 12.5%, following up on a nice reversal on Thursday, and some heavy volume behind this move as well. But last week was really the time to get into this name.
Yeah, and I got to hand it to you and Ken, talking about InMode
All
on
Ken.
Thursday. Well, yeah, but you asked a good question. So, that Thursday reversal again, as we saw in the Nasdaq, and the reason why I'm just pointing this out is, look, sometimes you get these setups and you're looking for a reason why. Why would it be bouncing? And sure, you could say, look, this was bouncing with the market, but it's worth it sometimes to be acting on the signal and not necessarily wait for the why. Now, in this case, the big why here was, hey, they announced, they pre-announced, they guided heavier, much higher than estimates. And, this is already a company that has some pretty solid earnings growth. I mean, look at the recent numbers. I mean, you've got 104%, 130% in the last 2 quarters. The revenue, 60%, 62%. And they basically said, look, we're gonna blow away the estimates. I mean, they were adding like, at least 10% onto their full year estimate for revenue. So that's a pretty big jump, like an extra 30, 40 million on 300 million in revenue. So it's a big deal that they're so positive about the way things are going. So of course that's going to be reflected in the stock price, because everyone has to kind of revalue this. If you're coming out and saying, look, we're going to blow these estimates away, hey, that just says that the return to shareholders is going to be a lot more, and the price is reflecting that. But getting back to that original point, you want to be on the lookout for these reversals. And it is hard because you're looking at the day of Thursday, and look, I'm right there with you. I was looking at it and saying, this could be it. This could, we got extended. We were feeling extended. This could be it. This could be a correction for a little while. This could come all the way down to the 50-day moving average line. But the NASDAQ held up. It started reversing off of its lows. And a lot of companies did that as well. And those were the companies that I actually own shares of InMode myself. I had picked it up earlier. I was adding on Thursday because, again, it was an opportunity to pick up, get a little bit heavier position in one of my big winners. And, again, water the flowers is what we like to do. You pull your weeds, the ones that aren't working, we cut our losses short very quickly. And we want to put more money into the ones that are working. And so Thursday was an opportunity to do just that.
Yeah. And as you said, it all comes back to being flexible, right? It could have been a really nasty day on Thursday that could have led to even worse action, but you can't just assume that. You have to roll with the punches, and these reversals presented themselves, especially with stocks as strong as InMode that has had such a huge run, has the fundamentals. That's something you want to keep your eyes peeled for.
Right. And I would absolutely recommend, hey, learn a little bit more about the story, what they're doing with, the radio frequency technology and aesthetics, and, making people feel beautiful about themselves, looking pretty. And, who doesn't want that, especially for us that are on Zoom all the time. A lot of people, right? So.
Exactly. Thank God it's not 4K HD.
Right.
But anyway, thanks so much, Justin, for that analysis. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back with more tomorrow morning on IBD Live, where we're joined by David Ryan. So we hope you tune in, investors.com/IBD Live for that. And on Wednesday's show, we're going to have Mark Minervini and David Ryan. So a lot of great content and insights coming up this week on the live show, our daily morning live stream. We hope you tune in, investors.com/IBD Live. Thanks for watching, everyone. We'll see you back here tomorrow.